3. They may get mixed in if you have your folders sorted differently or if you've downloaded them. But on mine, they're right at the bottom, so alphabetically, that's kind of where they land. The one thing I want to draw your attention to specifically is a spacing sheet. And this is not a formal document that anybody was like, hey, this is in a book somewhere. I literally just made this up one day. Doing this, I noticed that people struggled with how to lay these out. In your drawing book, and I'd have to look and see what the page is, there is a whole chapter on orthographic spacing. So when we did formal technical orthographic drawings by hand, there was actually a formula. It was like a squared plus b squared plus c squared divided by 3, and then you had to figure out the page size and then put that on there. It was a crazy amount of work, but necessary because you wanted the drawing centered on whatever sheet you had. So when they talk about those sheets, they're talking about, an A size paper is like a letter size. The 8.5 by 11, 9 by 12 is really what the sheet size is. And if you wanted your drawing centered on there, you had to figure out the length by the width, and then you had to do this formula and make sure all that was in there. But when you transition to CAD, the sheet size is whatever you tell it when you print, and then it sizes your drawing to that. So in order to effectively space that, I came up with these. I'm sure that every instructor has a different set of them. They're not like by any means a golden rule, but these are the ones that I've been using for a few years, and they seem to work out pretty well. So as we go, you're going to probably need to reference that. I don't know if you want to have it open or if you just remember. It's not like super complex, but that is in your M-Drive folder as well if you'd like it. Okay? So, so these guys, we're going to start with this set right here, 2.75 between the views, 1.75 for overall dimensions, and 1.0 for regular dimensions. So as I'm taking a look at these guys, you're going to notice that you have been given an isometric view of this. And then we're going to draw the orthographic view of it. So I'm just going to slide this dude over here and draw these side by side. So again, I'm in my layer or my template, so I have all my layers just like I used to. And as I'm doing this, I start with the most detailed view. There's a couple reasons for that. One, it's one of those best practices deal. As you get into especially solid modeling, as you're recreating these things, it's always nice to be able to start with the most detailed view. Also with isometrics, it's nice to start with the most detailed view because then you can just pull the depth off the corners. You'll see that here in a little bit. I don't think any of the views here are like mind-meltingly difficult, right? But if you look at the right side view, it's essentially a square stacked on top of another square. It's pretty simple. Same idea if you're looking at the top view, it's a rectangle with a square next to it. So that kind of defaults me to the front view as the quote-unquote most complex. It's not really hard, but more so than the other simple geometric shapes. So I'm going to draw the front view.
Could you just turn the one light off just so I can see a little bit better?
So I'm going to draw the front view here, and I just kind of start towards the bottom. Again, because we can manipulate this in space, it doesn't really matter where you start. But I'm going to kind of start towards the bottom, and I'm really big on orthographic snap for this. You can probably tell that we're doing ortho drawings, right? So this is exactly what this thing was meant for. So I'm going to push F8 there and make sure that's locked on. And like I said, this was kind of intended for this application, so it's really nice to use. And if I'm taking a look at this guy, there are times that people are really confused by this. So I just wanted to kind of talk a little bit about this. The way that you can differentiate which view from which, and I know we talked about this several weeks ago when we did the sketches, is you can kind of take a look at this leading corner. This front corner right here is going to be kind of like the dividing line, right? So if I have this guy, I know that everything to the right of that is going to be the right side, hence the right side view, right? And everything to the left of that guy becomes the front view. And so that, to me, is the easiest way to determine which things are in the front versus which things are in the right side. So if I'm looking here at this bottom part, I can see that this part becomes like this Z shape, okay? So everything that's in this front view is this Z right here. And then everything to the right of that becomes the right-hand side view. So as I'm drawing this thing, I know that I need to lay this thing out. It's going to be 1, and I'm just drawing from the top left corner. It honestly does not matter, for the most part, where you start from. You just need to kind of dissect this thing. I know we talked about that a little last week when you're looking at these prints, like, how do you start? Well, you need to kind of pick a spot and go. And from these, it's not always the easiest to work from the outside in or the inside out. You just kind of have to pick a starting point. So I'm going to start at that top corner, and I'm just going to work my way around. And so I'm going to go 1 over, I'm going to go 1 down, I'm going to go 2 over, and you can see this kind of start to take shape here. So there's my Z. Give me a second to catch up there.
I did it.
Good job.
I did the thing.
So, once you have this, I know that I need to space things out. And if you go back to this sheet that we were kind of talking about here, this is where these guys kind of come into effect. This imperial dimensions between views is what I'm going to do. And the most common error that people make with this is which corner they measure from. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but it honestly is the most common thing that people do wrong. So if I'm doing this, I'm going to measure off this top corner here, and I'm going to go up 2.75 to the next view. But if I go off of this bottom corner, when I go up 2.75, I've really only gone up how far? 1.75, because I have the difference of this shape that I've taken out of it. Now that's going to seem really simplistic at this point, but when we get to the future drawings, you're going to be like, oh man, I measured off the wrong corner. So keep that in mind. You always want to measure off the highest point of this view. So I'm just going to pull a line, 2.75, and this is where this guy is going to start. So as I look at this thing, again, this should be really easy to understand, but for whatever reason, in people's minds, they really get